centering God in relationships. I believe this is a great first date conversation, but one of my closest friends asked me my perspective on what does it mean to center God in a romantic relationship. And I really thought about this and answered intentionally from a multi layered perspective. I also think it is extremely important to name and know I am not uber religious by any means. And the prerequisite information as we're continuing this conversation is within the confines of Christianity in the South in a heteronormative relationship. Also, this couple in particular is Black, and also preparing for engagement and marriage. That background information is very important as understanding this from like a case study perspective, right? And I was talking to my friend on understanding you need to know your relationship to faith, your understanding of who or what God is, and this conversation on church as an institution, specifically the Black church, and how that differs from the white church. And the way I am segmenting and having those two confines is because that is absolutely important within the context of the United States. You have to understand the church as an institution and what the Black church is and from its inception and creation, right? And the pillars of freedom and resistance in every magnitude. Also, the Black church relationship to literacy, and because at one point reading was quite literally illegal, in the first book in which many enslaved people had access to was the Bible. That is important in understanding the significance historically and from a literature perspective and from a resistance and freedom perspective is so important. Also understanding the conception of the AME church and why there is this segregation between the white and Black church, and also as we see it today, especially within the understanding of megachurches. Why that background information is so important is to understand where you are seeking wise counsel from is so important, especially when you're seeking wise counsel from any institutions. And it is important to understand the significance in divinity training and also theology training. And so if you're seeking like premarital counseling from a pastor, you want to know where they got their divinity schooling from, and also that the advice that they are giving is not oppressive. So that is a very shortened and condensed and also nuanced conversation from the layer of institutional guidance and wise counsel. The second point of conversation in which we were having is one's understanding of God, if they believe in God, and also if your partner has the same alignment on what and who God is and how God has showed up in not only your life and their life, and is there alignment here. And again, not from like this prescriptive or scripture perspective, but in a tangible way. Again, not in this like character or this animated conversation of what and who God is, but if you are someone that believes in God, no matter your religion, it's so important for you to have that touch point, or those touch points, right? Because that is where you find a deeper sense in life, a deeper meaning. And then lastly, I had this conversation about faith and understanding, again, where does your sense and source of faith come from, also from an individual perspective, but also this shared faith in which you are deepening and building your relationship on, also through this lens of like transparency and to understand that it is authentic, because I think a lot of times, and we see this conversation starting to be cycled of like these outsourcing of opinions, these outsourcing of validations, this outsourcing of your voice. And if that is a trend or a habit, what makes you think that your outsourcing of faith is the exception? And so also understanding and deeply understanding the trust in your voice, the trust in your faith, the trust in how you navigate life. And also to put all those things in conversation together on how you are centering sustainability in romantic relationship. I really hope that I'm articulating this conversation clearly, because this is such a vast and nuanced conversation, right? What if you have a person that is agnostic and someone that is deeply Christian and deeply religious? Like understanding that concept of how and if God is going to show up in your relationship based off of your aligned understanding on who or what God is. These are phenomenal questions that I think would make a great first date question, because it allows for you, one, to get to know someone's background beyond like a resume or interview style first date, but also to understand where someone is pulling their source of faith, their source of joy also, depending if that is faith aligned or a religious aligned or more from a practical and tangible perspective. This also gets you to understand one's background growing up, right? And this cultural competency, again, referencing the Black church within the context of the United States, that is a very specific and nuanced institution, especially because it is deeply tied to the story of slavery in the United States. There is no separation there, especially as we are speaking about freedom and liberation. And then this also will get you to understand, what does freedom and liberation and resistance mean to you from a spiritual or a faith or a religious perspective, assuming that your understanding or lack thereof of who and what God is, no matter what your religion or spiritual background is, you want to believe something that is going to liberate you. You want to believe in something or someone that is going to get you to understand freedom as it relates to life, as it relates to self-expression. Again, even if you are agnostic, even if you are atheist, even if you are Christian or Muslim or Buddhist, right? When we're understanding the purpose of life, it is within the confines of liberation, of freedom, and also resistance and how that falls. And I really urge anybody, no matter what your religious background or spiritual discipline is in, is to understand, is the areas, spaces, places, texts, books in which you are seeking wise counsel from also oppressing you? And I don't mean this solely from a literature perspective, but in the way in which you internalize it. Is your faith rooted in shame? Is your relationship to religion rooted in shame? Is your relationship to life rooted in shame? Is your relationship to liberation of self, of dreaming, of desires, of romantic relationship rooted in shame and judgment and oppression? And where did you learn that language from? And so I think these conversations are so important and so vast and so nuanced, because this same conversation is going to be vastly different on the East, vastly different for someone that grew up from a Hindu perspective, right? Or from an agnostic perspective, or from a Buddhist perspective. But it allows you to gain a deeper sense of understanding in not only what you want in romantic relationship, but again, from this perspective of shared alignment, shared joy, right? What if you are someone that seeks joy and gains joy from your relationship to God, and you're finding partners that does not have the same belief system? And so I think these conversations are typically labeled as like tough conversations, and I want us to retrain ourselves from looking at tough conversations as open and conversations that are going to allow you to stretch your space and place of thinking, and also understand the nuance to conversations. You cannot exclude the historical component in the same way that you cannot exclude the religious component, or the spiritual component, or the financial component, or the romantic component. And this is also going to allow you to either deepen in alignment or understand we are not in alignment.